Hello and welcome to another Tuesday Talk with Ruby Reese. My name is Killian, and alongside being your host for this very podcast, I am also co-founder at Ruby Reese and at dognutrition.ie. This week, I'm going to change things up and not ask you to follow or subscribe or give us a 5-star review anywhere. You've already done that, and we thank you for it so much. This week, we have a new ask. We're going to ask you to match any of our podcast episodes with someone from your network, be that a friend, a family member, a client, whoever they may be. Find a topic and match it to a person. That could be anything from our puppies episode, teenage dogs, our predatory episodes. We've covered amazing things like muzzle training, like dog sports, agility, flyball. There's so much, and there's something in there for everyone. So please do find an episode, match it up to a person, send it on to them, and it'll do justice to a couple of different things. Number one, the effort that we put in and the commitment of bringing out an episode every single week, preparing for a podcast, preparing questions, organising a time, and begging one of these amazing guests to come on and chat with us and share their knowledge for free, gratis, and we really appreciate it. So let's get their positive messages out there to as many people as we possibly can. That was my ask for this week. So this week we're actually talking a lot about acting as a community, and we hope to inject a lot of positivity into the dog professions out there. And I think it's amazing to have someone come on and speak with such raw vulnerability and honesty about their experiences in the dog industry. And I think everyone feels at times a little bit alone and questions what they're doing. So I absolutely love that we had the amazing Lea Chevalier on to chat all about this. And without further ado, I think the best thing that I can do is introduce her and let you listen into the conversation that we had. Hi Lea, thank you so much for coming on and joining us on the podcast this week. How are you doing?
I'm very good. Thank you so much for having me and Croquette.
Exactly. Welcome Croquette as well. Would you do us the pleasure of introducing yourself, please?
Absolutely. So I'm Lea. I have a company called Harmony for Paws in Dublin. I have been working with dog behavior and dog training for 4 years now, which is also the time that I have been in Ireland. So I started from scratch here. My specialty and my specialties and areas of expertise would be separation anxiety, like separation related problems. And I recently certified with the Dynamic Dog Practitioner Program, which means I can do full gait analysis on dogs, because one of the most common issues that we can see with our behavior clients is that the dog is in some form of pain or discomfort. So that became really important to me to know a bit more about what I was talking about. And when I go to a client, I really like to be able to spot when there is something that's disturbing the dog, and then we can go for further investigations when it's necessary.
Amazing. That was a brilliant introduction as well. Thank you very much for that. And we chose a really exciting topic to speak about today as well. We're going to talk all about injecting some positivity into kind of working as a professional in the dog world, right?
Yeah, definitely. I think that's very important to speak about the human part of the dog business, because we're always talking about dogs, about what we do with them and all of that, but we rarely discuss all the implications that running a small business, because most of us are small businesses, and all the joys of it, but also the challenges that it can bring on a daily basis, especially when you're starting out.
Definitely. And I love the opportunity to bring this up, because I think there's, I've had so many conversations one-on-one with people in the industry about lots of topics that I'm sure we're going to touch on. And I suppose, for some people it can be kind of like loneliness comes up and time management comes up as an issue, and we're going to get into loads of different types of topics, but I think there's so many similarities and so many people feel it, so it's amazing to have the opportunity. So thank you for being brave and coming on and chatting about it, because obviously like the emotional and the human side of things are often things that people have kind of trouble speaking about, so it's brilliant to get them out in the open. And I guess that's one area that we wanted to maybe start off with, like the importance of collaboration and networking. So how can dog trainers collaborate with other professionals like groomers, pet sitters, vets, etc., to build up a good community?
I think that's a very interesting question, because collaboration is absolutely like a massive key in our industry. The way I started like approaching people and things like that, usually I would, for example, if we're looking for groomers, I would recommend somebody I would use for my own dog to begin with. So, for example, the first one that I met in Dublin, her business is Dog Hub, and she's in Raheny. So she was taking care of like grooming for sensitive dogs. And I know, like, I approached her initially to see if we could maybe work together a little bit. And then I was like, you know what? My dog is really sensitive. This little guy here was actually falling asleep on me right now. And basically, I loved her approach. And I loved the fact that she let me in the grooming room with her. And that the few times we've actually met, that wasn't even to groom him. That was just to give him treats in the salon. And that was just to get him to be a bit comfortable. And the first time we actually decided to groom him, that was just the Paws. And the idea was like, okay, so if he's comfortable, we're going to go for it. If he's not, even though we've done one paw and not the other ones, that's fine. So I really loved her approach around this. And then, like when I started developing my client base, I obviously work with the feedback that people give me. Like when they tell me they've been to a grooming salon and they have a nervous dog and the dog was really comfortable, that kind of thing. This is, like, I'd say I would be a bit reluctant to recommend somebody I wouldn't use for my own dog. Obviously, you don't always have a full vision of what people do, but I'd say getting in touch with them, asking them their vision, how a session works, how, like, all that kind of things. And I'd say for pet sitting and all that kind of all the different fields we can have in the dog industry, I think it is really, really important to know a bit more about the person, know a bit more how they would handle a specific situation and all that kind of questions. And like, I know since my dog is really sensitive, when I approach a professional, I want to know that his needs will be taken care of. And his space will be respected and all that kind of things. So, like, it goes quite slowly to kind of build a trust-based community. But I think when you have really solid relationships, they're more profitable for everybody. Because then you know, like, for example, when you're sending a client to somebody, you know that you can count on that person not to disappoint them and to treat the dog the way they should be.
You're so right. I mean, you're adding so much value to these clients that are coming and asking for your advice, and you're giving away, advice for things that you can't offer, but someone that's really hyper specialized in that, like for grooming and for I know the veterinary world, we get asked all the time in because we get out to events and to markets all the time, we get asked all the time for advice on who to go to for loads and loads and loads of different topics, and we're always recommending people. And like you say, you don't always have first-hand experience with every single type of service, I suppose. Like, for example, Ruby is a short-haired dog, so grooming is just something that I have to go on other people's experiences, and luckily we speak to so many people that we can get those kind of ideas from different people whose opinions we trust, but I suppose on the other side, Ruby has been to a vet, she's been to a hydrotherapist, she's been to this and that, so like you say, you kind of use some of your own personal experiences as well, but I think it's great value that we're adding to clients as well. Once you start working with professionals, you realize that you're tapping into networks, right?
Yeah, for sure. And like for example, if somebody is asking me for a pet sitter that's not in my area, because in my area I know who I would recommend,
Hmm.
and in some different areas as well. But if it's an area where I don't really have any connections, I will ask colleagues that also do dog training, and dog behavior if somebody knows somebody they would trust and recommend.
Hmm.
Because yeah, obviously we can't know every single person that's out there, especially like it is an industry that's really expanding at the moment. So
Yeah.
obviously you can't be very familiar with everybody. But I'd say if another colleague really trusts somebody, I would trust their opinion and be like, oh, that person, I've heard they're good.
Yeah.
So you might give it a go. And then you really often when I recommend somebody, I kind of ask the client what their experience was as well. And most of the time, like they come back to me saying, oh, they were lovely, and that's fine, and
Yeah. Yeah.
everything went well, really.
Exactly. So you get the feedback as well. And are there any examples that really stand out to you of a successful collaboration with another dog professional?
Yes, I would say so. When I started out, I reached out to Susie for a
Hmm.
bit of help because she was doing it. I don't know if she still does it, she probably does, little mentoring sessions for young professionals that were starting out. And that was extremely helpful. Like, I learned so much through her. And then I got to know her more as a person, and she's absolutely amazing. But yeah, that was my first real like contact with somebody from the industry. And I'm so glad I did reach out because it's like it was invaluable, and she is absolutely fabulous. I would definitely like that's the one that probably marked me the most.
Yeah. Yeah.
But otherwise, yeah, like I have collaborations with pet sitters, with groomers. Like, for example, the pet sitter that I use for Croquette has a very strong interest in behavior, and he's shadowed me during consultations a few times. And
Yeah.
so that way, when he has a client and he feels like there is something to address, like he will send my details. And then otherwise, the same when I have somebody in my area that needs some pet sitting or walking or that, I know that I can recommend them with my eyes closed. And that's definitely really important, I'd say.
Definitely, I totally agree with you on collaboration as well. You know, there's so many people out there with so much brilliant knowledge that are just so happy to share it. You know,
Yeah.
I mean, and I suppose brilliant example of it is this very podcast. You know, you're coming on here in your free time for free to share with me your knowledge, and I'm so grateful for it. But I'm so grateful for the fact that like every single week of the year, I manage to talk someone into coming on and sharing
Yeah.
knowledge for free. So you know, like the potential to collaborate is
Yeah.
there. People will do
Yeah.
it, and there's so much value to be gained.
Definitely. And another initiative that I really think is absolutely really like amazing. It's what Catherine from Snout and About is doing.
Hmm.
The Dog Pro Network. That's also a very good way to connect with people, and she has massive knowledge as well. And just organizing a network of people who want to collaborate, I think that's fabulous. So that's another really good example of collaboration that was initiated, same in her free time, like just so people could actually create connections. And like it is always when, for example, you can't take a case on, knowing that whether it is because you don't feel like this is your area or it's not in your geographic area, or for any reason, knowing that you have trusted people that are qualified and that will address the situation as good as you would, or probably even better. This is amazing to be able to do
Yeah,
that.
definitely. And like you say, on top of geographic area, you also know people outside of your, you know, your knowledge area. For example, we always say, okay, Chris and I, yeah, we're certified nutritionists, we have a brand, we know what we're doing with lots of things, but we're not trainers, we're not behaviorists, we're not hydrotherapists, we're not vets, we're not physiotherapists. You know, there's quite a big world. We're not groomers. There's a huge world out there that we don't know about, and that we can just invite other people in to help. So it's incredible. I totally agree with you.
Oh yeah,
And
definitely.
And moving on maybe to a related topic, then we all know that imposter syndrome is rife within the dog community. I don't know why, but I suppose many dog trainers in particular we hear struggle with imposter syndrome, especially earlier on, maybe in their career. How can people build confidence in their expertise?
That is, that's a tough one because I would be like massively impacted by imposter syndrome, although I'm getting a
Mhm,
bit better. But I think I understand why, because in my previous career, I wasn't like that at all.
mhm,
I think the reason for, like, the reason why it's that present in that industry is because when we're working with clients, we're giving a part of ourselves. It's not
mhm.
like, for example, if you hire a plumber, it's a very technical stuff. There's a hole, they'll plug it.
Yeah.
There's a pipe to change, they'll change the pipe. Here, we're working with humans. We're working with the dogs, obviously, but the biggest part, and we probably don't realize this at the beginning. I know I didn't when I started out. I didn't expect the human part of it to be that prevalent and to be
Mhm,
even more important than the relationship with the dog. And I think it is an industry, especially dog training and dog behavior. I mean, I'm only speaking for that part because I don't know
yeah.
how a groomer's relationship will be with their clients. Obviously, they're based on human things as well. But
Mhm,
when you're working with training and behavior, you're trying to get the person to do what you think is right and what's going to improve the dog's welfare and well being. And you
mhm.
try to do it in a way that people will think you're qualified enough, will think you're good enough to actually accept that you're telling them to do this. So it is the thing to do. And I'd
Yeah.
say it is like the whole thing ends up being really personal because during a consultation, you're going to have a very different approach, whether the individual, like depending on the personality of the person you're speaking with.
Yeah.
And there's a part of us, obviously, we want them to like us because if they don't like us, they're like, oh, I don't like that person. They're not going to want to do what you want them to do and what you
Yeah.
think is right for their dog. So when we're with a client, we are really like giving a big part of ourselves in the job. It's not necessarily only the training skills and the behavior modification programs. It's mostly based on the relationship you can have with the person you have in front of you. And I think that's why, like, if a client doesn't like you when you're a dog trainer or behavior consultant, you're like, oh, so it means like they didn't like a part of what I gave them. And you're wondering whether it's your skills, whether it is just because sometimes just doesn't click. That happens.
Yeah.
Like sometimes you have a client and you feel like you're talking to them, but you're not getting through. And when you're leaving there, you're like, oh, like I obviously missed something here. But then it's kind of comes and touches all your everything that you are really and not just a technical skill. So I think this is why imposter syndrome is that present in that industry, mostly among women. I'm sorry, but it is very, maybe because they're more women, I don't know, but
Yeah.
yeah, I think
Yeah.
it is more prevalent within the women community for some reason.
Your comments so far have made me already think about this in a different way. Like you're so right that I suppose when particularly in training and behavior, you're asking the humans to change their behavior. That means changing little pieces of their life and almost like their moral beliefs. So if you say don't feed the dog from the table, and I'm not saying you're saying that, but if you do say that, you're literally getting them to change a part of their life. You're inserting yourself in their minds into their kitchen at their dinner table and changing something. Or if you said something, and I don't think you do say this, but don't let the dog sleep in the bed, or don't let the dog walk in front of you on a walk, or whatever it is, you're changing. Maybe that walk is the only time they get out of the house in the day. Their bed, you're
Yeah.
not saying literally but metaphorically inserting yourself into their bedroom, and you're kind of interfering almost in their lives, and that's what they're paying you for. But of course there's going to be from time to time pushback from those customers. They're going to challenge it and say, well, why shouldn't I feed the dog from the table? So they're challenging your opinions, and I can totally see it. It's a very personal thing, and like you say, you're almost giving a piece of yourself to
Yeah.
the session.
And you're also asking them really often to do something that's not convenient for them. Like, I'm going to take what I know very well and separation anxiety training. If you want a separation anxiety protocol to have all its chances of success, it is really important that the people can minimize or even like suspend, in the ideal scenario, absences, so that way the dog doesn't revert back to thinking what's happening is scary. So you're telling people who were used to going out for hours and hours and leaving their dog. Sometimes it's what they did with their previous dog. Sometimes it is what they do at the moment. And you're coming to their place telling them, oh, you need to stop that. Otherwise, you're just going to keep getting back and back and back in your training. And obviously, that's the kind of discussion that is always really sensitive, because people at the beginning are like, how am I going to do this? And that's like the first reaction, which is very human, is to be like, oh, but I can't do this. And then they kind of start thinking, and part of the job as well is to support them in that process of finding solutions so they don't have to leave the dog. But we're really here asking them to change, as you say, their behavior, but also their daily routine. And I think that's deeply uncomfortable for a lot of human beings. And for myself included, I would be like that as well. Like, it is very uncomfortable to be like, oh, so it means I can't do what I want when I want to. It means I'm not free to go outside on my own. Like, it is a big change for, like, when you want to change a dog's behavior, especially when you're working with severe cases of like anxiety, fear, phobias. Obviously, there's a lot of changes that need to be implemented. We're not just talking about teaching the dog to sit. We're asking the dog to change their emotions towards something that they don't like or something that's scary for them. So obviously, we need to organize everything in a way that the dog is set up for success. But most importantly, we need to make sure the human is set up for success. Because down the line, it is the human that's doing everything that we want them to do. So if we fail at this and creating a trust-based relationship, then it is quite hard to get somebody to follow your lead and to follow your expertise area if they don't trust you.
Absolutely. And when people do push back, especially, you know, when they start doubting whether they can do it, whether it's the right way forward, how do you kind of handle that then in situations and try and hold course a little bit?
I think a big part of it is understanding why they feel like this is something they're not going to be able to do. Because I think if we don't take the time to listen to their objections, we miss the point, and we're like, oh, you can do it. So like, if you tell me, for example, like, you can't put this in your shelf, and I'm like, of course you can. And I'm not trying to take the time to explain why you can't. It's because maybe your shelf isn't straight and it's going to fall on the ground. So then we fix it. We make the shelf straight. It's just a shit example, but we make the shelf straight so that way it can hold the object. Yeah. And we want to, like, once we've listened, and it's not. Sometimes we don't find solutions. Like, we're not superheroes, and we need resources, and most of that actually joins the subject that we were discussing before about collaborations. For example, Absolutely. In the case of separation anxiety, if I feel like somebody that needs to go to work in the office 5 days a week, the management solutions can be family or friends, but if there's no one that is willing to take care of the dog, then we start looking into daycares, into pet sitters, that kind of thing. So this is why it's massively important to have a big network of other professionals that we actually trust. Because obviously, if we recommend a pet sitter, we don't want to hear the week after that the dog was abused. Or
of course, yeah. And actually, you know, I suppose one of the situations as well that people come up against quite a lot is, you know, particularly new trainers, is feel they're not qualified enough. So I suppose that's one side of it, but also there's an importance on getting qualified as well, right? So how do we navigate this topic, and how do trainers know that they're qualified enough to start at least taking on clients and feeling comfortable in that situation?
I think there are a lot of different organizations that promote ethical and science-based training. So like for example, like there's a lot of different ones that like the IMDT, for example. So if you pass a certification with them, like you can't have it completely wrong, and at least you have a basic understanding of how a dog works, like how their brain works, how they learn, all that kind of things. So it can go through qualifications, but it can also come from experience because there are brilliant trainers that are not doing so well academically speaking, but they still have the skills. So I'd say a big support system, like a solid one, at least. It doesn't need to be big. Like I don't have 100 people in my like close surroundings, but being able to chat with other people about a case, for example. Let's say there's something that you find a bit difficult, reaching out to somebody else and ask them, like, do you think I did everything I could have? And they are other professionals. Like I know Catherine, for example, is doing sessions with people on like consultations on cases, like real life cases that if you're struggling a little bit with, she can give you a bit of her insight. And that is something that's really important because even sometimes if you don't have like a paper that says you can do this, it doesn't mean you can't. And then as long as you're like trying to look for answers, as long as you're trying to educate yourself and learn more, and I think the ability to question yourself is the most important thing. Because a lot of the people that are not on what I would call the good side, like people who would use aversive methods, we're not here to create a debate whether to use aversives or not. I am absolutely convinced, like I'm on the side that it's a big no-go for me. People think it is, right? Like this is not the debate here. But really often it goes with no questioning themselves and be like, okay, those method works. And that works, and I'm going to keep doing it. And they don't really try to look for what's causing the behavior. And because if we think about it, suppressing a behavior in a dog, that's extremely easy. Anybody can do it. Anybody.
Yep.
Even my grandmother, who's 95, if I told her to tell my dog to shut up, if she can, like,
she'd find a way
to use anything, she will do it. Like,
yeah.
So yeah, that's and that is a big thing in that industry, I think, to like navigate what other people have done before us. Because we really often get calls from people who have been working with somebody previously. And the horrors we hear sometimes, like there's no point getting into it, like, because but there's things that are really, really damaging to the dog's welfare, to their well-being, to the relationship. And people tell us sometimes, oh, like, but they told me to do that. Like, fair enough that you were tempted to do it. Fair enough that, like, when you have a professional in front of you and they're telling you to do that, you're going to give it a go. And it is not always that easy to question. Like when you're going to the doctor, if they tell you need to do that, you're going to give it a go. You're going to try, even though you're not fully convinced. You're going to be like, oh, maybe I'll try this. Sometimes not. But I'd say in terms of like the trainer part, I would say chatting with like-minded people is a really good confidence booster. Because even if you realize when you're chatting about a case, you realize that you haven't necessarily done things necessarily how you feel like it should have been done. You're still learning from the other person.
Absolutely.
And chatting to them, being like, okay, so how do you see it? So then, and having different, like, nobody is always right. So just sometimes, even just chatting with somebody else, that gives you a different perspective, and you can even see things that you haven't seen before. Even before the person answers your question, you're like, oh, sometimes just chatting about something and phrasing what your concern is really helpful, and that helps you seeing it in a very different perspective.
Definitely. Yeah. And then, so you've spoken about different schools of thought, different schools of even of training in the I suppose how to train a trainer, the different organizations that kind of offer training and things like that. So now a dog trainer is officially a dog trainer, but I think what a lot of people don't see is that there's a whole other side of the business that they have to run as well, right? So I feel that's a challenge that people love to come into, particularly into the dog industry, because they want to work with dogs, and then, like you mentioned already, they end up working more with people probably than dogs a lot of the time. And then on top of it, there's a whole host of other tasks as well, that you have to put together and run your whole business. So is that a challenge that a lot of people come up with against in the industry?
Yeah, I think definitely, because the reason why we were attracted to the dog business in the first place is, as you said, is to work with dogs.
Mm-hmm.
And like myself, for example, I never really, like, that wasn't a goal for me to be self-employed.
Yeah.
I did it because that was pretty much the only way to do what I loved. So I was like, okay, I'll get on board with this, but I didn't really anticipate how challenging it can be sometimes, like all the loneliness of it, and all I'd say the admin for most of us is a big thing. Like, a few of us have no problem sitting in front of the computer and doing things. I know I'm not one of those persons. I did all my accounting for literally like a week before the tax return was due. And I had loads of it. I didn't do anything for a whole year. Like 2023, I didn't do anything until I was like, oh, 31st of October, I'm supposed to do a tax return. And I realized I didn't have anything in writing, so I had to go through everything. And it is a big, like, finding the motivation for those boring tasks. Yeah. To me, they're boring. Some people will like it. Fair play to you. But to me, that's absolutely boring. And yeah, like, definitely, the one I hear the most is definitely that part, the admin part.
Yeah.
I know a lot of us struggle with social media and things like that. I would be one of those as well. I don't really have a strong interest for it. And it's just not something I'm good at. But then when you start a business, you really need it as well. So maybe finding somebody else who can do it for you. Maybe I should have done that years ago. I don't know. But it is a big thing to like have different jackets that you can wear. One day you're a dog trainer. One day you're a psychologist. One day you're just
an accountant, a social media marketing manager. Yeah, and that's it. I think it's such a broad kind of skill set that's potentially needed or expected of you. Nobody is going to be really, really good at numbers and organization and the marketing and creativity and the psychology, like you mentioned. That person doesn't exist that's good at it all. So I think, you're so right. Getting other people on board and knowing where your talents lie is really, really important. And I think like you say, the responsibilities, even if you have an accountant, I was speaking with an accountant recently, and he said, you'd be surprised how many small business owners come in at the end of the year with a shoebox full of receipts and invoices and say, here you go, these are my accounts for the year, please help. And he said, it can be a disaster. So I suppose it's good to get someone on board that's able to kind of structure your business a little bit if you're struggling with that.
Oh yeah, for sure. And being able to admit that there are areas you're struggling at is like, nobody's, as you were saying, is perfect, even though I don't think perfect is a thing, but nobody is able to do everything and be excellent at it. So obviously, I don't know, in that industry, I'd say probably it is way more valuable to be good with people and with dogs than being at admin. Absolutely. Even though it is very needed, and then you end up in trouble and in a big panic and you don't sleep for a whole week because you haven't done anything in a year. But yeah.
And the fact that you're not good at it doesn't mean you're alone. I mean, these other small businesses that are accountants and social media managers and whatever, they wouldn't exist if there wasn't a client base for it. Sure. So it's something that's seen commonly around. So that's totally normal. And like, I suppose that begs the question then. You mentioned about marketing as well. Like, how do you find customers? If you're not spending 24/7 on social media and the rest of it, how do you create business for your small business?
I'd say collaboration with other professionals.
Hmm.
That's the number one. Like I get most of my clients through referrals and from either from other professionals that now know me, which was like my number one challenge when I arrived in Ireland. I knew nobody. I'm from France. I arrived here. I was like, oh, great, I'll start a dog business. Let's do this. Started like absolutely wanting to do this full time. Not a doubt that the whole thing was gonna within a year be absolutely successful. And then you realize actually you need other people and you need a network, and that takes time to build.
Hmm.
So it's just being patient, and when you're trying to build relationships with other people to make sure they're solid and they're not, because otherwise they'll fall apart if it's just a superficial thing and you don't really know, like for example, if you're recommending somebody but you don't really know what they're doing, you don't really know how they're doing it, obviously that will backfire, and then you'll end up having clients telling you, oh, but that person wasn't good. I'm like, oh, that doesn't look really good now. So it
Yeah.
does take a lot of time for sure. And I think if you're starting from scratch, maybe having another job on the side at the beginning is the way to go.
Hmm.
Like I
Yeah.
know for me at the moment, I have a full-time job that's really flexible and leaves me a lot of mental space for the dog part. But that released so much tension in my life, and that released a lot of headspace that I didn't have even when I was less busy than I am at the moment.
Hmm.
And I like it's not the solution for everybody, but I know for me that's what works. Being able to have something else so I don't really rely on it. I have something that pays the bills. And then I end up being, I think, more available for my clients when I'm with them.
Yeah.
I'm also taking less, obviously, because I can't be in two places at the same time. So having less is also, for me, a way to do it better at the moment. And that also leaves me time for studying, because before, like we were talking about imposter syndrome,
Hmm.
for me, the way to fight this was getting more certifications
Absolutely.
and be
And
like, yeah, go
that
ahead.
leads to my next question so beautifully that I have to take the segue
Go for
because
it.
I was going to say, like, dog training methods and research, they're always like constantly evolving. How do you stay on top of the latest trends? And do you think, workshops and conferences and things like that are something that are really, really important to the training community?
Oh, definitely. They're massively important. And as you say, like everything changes constantly. So something that everybody thought was right 10 years ago isn't necessarily right
Hmm.
now. It doesn't mean that people were wrong. It just means that they had different information in their hands and they dealt with that. But now we know more. Science evolved a lot, and reading a lot of different, like, Susie was talking about it in the Dog Pro network, reading papers of
Hmm.
research and things like that. Or even sometimes you don't have to read the whole thing, just finding a summary of it. Like, because papers can sometimes be 20 pages long. Um, you don't
Yeah.
necessarily need to read the whole thing, but just finding new information. And when there's something that you don't necessarily agree with or that you don't really understand, chatting about it with colleagues, that brings you a whole new perspective on the subject.
Hmm.
And yeah, I
Absolutely.
think we can learn from other people in the business, whether they've been in the business for 20 years or if they started yesterday.
Hmm. Yeah.
Everybody's has something to offer, and I think that's part of that's also helping with like imposter syndrome, because when you're starting out, obviously you don't have the experience of somebody that's been doing this for years and years and years, but you're also bringing a fresh eye. And I'd
Yeah.
say being open-minded and keeping questioning yourself constantly, even though we maybe that like doing it a bit too much is what leads to imposter syndrome. I don't know, but I think it is really important to be able to admit that you don't know everything. You will never know everything. Anyways, there's so much to learn in that industry. So yeah, so I'd say for me the uh, what does it is keeping doing more and more courses, because I
Yeah.
always learn something from them and getting different certifications. I know they're just a paper, but they kind of give you a little bit of, I mean, for yourself, not necessarily towards people, but being able to complete the whole process. You're like, oh, I might actually be not that bad.
Hmm.
And then that
Absolutely.
really helps.
And like attending some of these conferences, events, even just dog events in general in your area, I think are such a brilliant place to find access to new material, find new ways of thinking, and build up that network as well, like
Yeah.
of people that you can work with going forward. Because I think sometimes lots of us are leaving the house a lot, but we're not bumping into other professionals because we're going to see a client or we're going to a specific thing, and we're not necessarily mingling among our peers as much. So it's always good to get out and
Yeah.
meet people as well.
And as well, the other thing that those events would bring is that most people we're meeting in those events are like-minded. Like, I
Yeah,
don't think in one of the conferences and seminars that I've attended around Dublin, I've never seen somebody who used a shock collar in those conferences. Like,
yeah,
they don't want to educate themselves. They don't need to. The behavior stops, So, like, so why would they?
yeah, yeah.
Um, so usually in those events, you will find people like if they're here, they want to learn something and they
They
want to do
want to learn, they
better.
want to be open-minded.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Even
absolutely.
when they're already brilliant, they want to do better. They want to learn something, and that's to me, that's a very important thing in that industry.
Yeah, amazing. And before we got onto that topic, you were just kind of leaning towards the work-life balance piece as well that I wanted to ask about. So I suppose running a dog business, and particularly a dog training business, can be really demanding. You mentioned some things already and suggested some others, but how do you maintain a healthy work-life balance and avoid burning out?
At the moment, my strategy would be when, like, I can afford to do this because I have a day job, but when sometimes I feel a bit overwhelmed or I'm a bit tired, I will just block my calendar for a whole week after
Mhm.
and just be like, if people really want to work with me, they'll wait a little bit, and the wait is not that long either. Um, and then I can spend a whole week, like when I'm back from my day job, I can just go to the park with my dog. I can just go have a drink with my friends. I can go to the gym. I can do things like that. And I think this is a great way to switch off. Which I only have had that day job for a year now. And before that, I was struggling way more with switching off because obviously I needed the business way more. And obviously, you feel like if you don't reply to that email within the next hour, they're going to go to somebody else. If you don't reply to that client's message that's struggling, they're going to be upset and then they're not going to be happy with you. I think when, uh, like, the fact that confidence, like self confidence, grows with experience as well, I think it also allows you to be a bit more detached from things and being like, okay, like it's fine. I'm not available within the next day. I'll reply to this when I can. And if they have gone somewhere else in the meantime, well, I hope it's a good one. And that's it.
Yeah, being available
Um,
24/7 is definitely a fast track to burnout. So it's
oh,
good
yeah, for sure.
to take a step back, and like you said earlier, giving yourself a bit more space is actually more beneficial to your clients, because you can then be fully with them and give them your full attention when you're healthy yourself. It's
Yeah.
it's
And even looking forward to the consultation. Like I know now that I do more. When I'm on my way, I'm actually like, hey, that's going to be fun. When your headspace is so busy with all those messages that you haven't answered, when you're like, oh, I need to make this work, I need to make this work, you just walk in with a big weight on your shoulders that obviously I'm pretty sure people can feel it. And then you're probably less convincing and you're probably less uh like motivated, and like when you're enjoying something, it does show.
absolutely, and you can be
And
more passionate about it as well,
yeah,
right?
yeah, for sure. I would say definitely like this is, I mean, everybody has a different way of dealing with things, but I know my work life balance is so much better now that I'm 10 times busier than I was before.
Yeah, yeah. So you have to be
And
kind to yourself.
yeah, exactly. And just sometimes remember that, like, if somebody reaches out because they have like a big issue with their dog, we don't work with a magic wand anyways. So the program that we're going to propose to them is not going to show effect immediately in the next few days. And you're not going to have, for example, if your dog is biting everyone, like things take time to get in motion and to get implemented. So if the way I see it now is that if people are looking for a quick fix, I'm not the right person for them anyways. And
Mhm.
now I don't have a problem to say it as well. I think I'm way more straightforward with this. As before, I would have tried to kind of compromise and go there anyways and maybe try to convince them. When now I'm like, this, if this is what you're looking for, like this is probably not, I'm probably not the right person for you.
Yeah,
And then
yeah,
when
we're
you
not
walk,
going to.
yeah,
I was going to say we're not going to get this sorted in one session. It's
yeah,
if you want life changing behaviors, then we're going to take some time.
yeah, exactly. And this is not the way, like behavior modification, when it's done ethically, this is not how it works. So
Mhm.
whether, like, if people have to wait for another day or two, or even to have, there's a few weeks before you actually can take them on, this is not going to make a massive difference in the result. So just, yeah, being aware of that and, yeah, like being kind to yourself. I think it is the most important thing. And agreeing that there is something you can't do. Agreeing with yourself that there are some people that you're not going to be able to change, and that some dogs will still have the same life after. And getting on the way to be okay with this is definitely also helping. I'm not
Absolutely.
saying it is easy every day. I'm not saying this is, even at the moment, sometimes I do struggle when I haven't been able to convince somebody that what I think is the best thing for their dog, and it's not the same for them. Like sometimes it is still hard. And I'm like, oh, my first thought is always, what could I have done better? And then sometimes you realize actually you have done everything you could with the information you had. And
Yeah.
then it is not necessarily your fault.
No, you can't change everything and change all things at all times. It's just not possible. There's always going to be things that people might not be in the right time or headspace or whatever to take things on board. Maybe they were just born not to listen to other people, and that you just have to be
Yeah,
okay with that. I think, right?
that or sometimes their life circumstances
Yeah,
don't give them the right headspace to be like able to listen
yeah,
or even to be able to apply it.
yeah,
Because there could be so many different reasons. Sometimes it is mental health, sometimes it is a work routine. Like there's so many different reasons. And yeah, so that's something, it is so hard to accept, like as a dog professional, being like, okay, I'm walking out of those people's place and I haven't been able to help them. You're like, oh, like that doesn't feel good at all.
yeah. Absolutely, because you obviously went into this career to help people and to
Yeah,
help dogs. So when you feel that for whatever reason you can't help them, then yeah, it's upsetting. But like you say, sometimes the situation just is what it is. And you've given loads of really good tips throughout the talk, so I think it's going to be beneficial for so many people. But if you could go back and give your younger self one piece of advice about running a dog business, what would it be?
be patient and be kind to yourself. Like, I
Hmm.
think the amount of pressure that I put myself on when I started, because I had this big ideal of how I wanted things to be, but then there's so much, like, you need to, like, give time to things as well.
Hmm.
Like, for the network to build it, like, it doesn't be just if you build it, but taking time to develop relationships that are going to help you and that are going to help you, like not necessarily in the business part of it, but having relationships and people who will support you, whether they're in the dog industry or not, because you can have great friends that will support you and they're not necessarily doing the same things than you are. But then you can
Yeah.
still talk to them about things and getting support from them. I think it is, yeah, like being surrounded by people that actually mean something to you. I would think that's the main thing. And accept that building a business does take a lot of time, and
Yeah.
that obviously it's not going to be like from one day to another unless you're extremely good with social media. Um, Even when that's the case, that still takes time to build. So I don't know. I'm not an expert in that
I think
field
if you
anyways, but yeah.
I think you're so right. I think if you want to build something for the long term, it's going to take you a while to build it. And I
Yeah.
think even like if you say if someone was really, really good and really lucky and got an overnight success on social media, I think if all the other pieces of learning didn't come together about running a business, and learning as they go, it might not be a very long running business anyway. You know, it might be an overnight success and then
Yeah.
also
And
die
then the whole
down
thing will
quickly.
crash. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So I think building for long term is such a good idea. Taking
Yeah.
your time with it and being a little bit patient with yourself. My God, so many of us could do with taking that
Yeah.
advice. So it's
And asking for help as well. Let's say that's like, to be fair, in my situation, like I never really had too much of an issue asking for help because I wanted to learn. But
yeah,
sometimes it is like admitting that there's something you're struggling with before you can ask for help, and realizing that this is an area of struggle, and it might be cause sometimes you think like you're not getting clients for a reason, and it's completely a different reason.
hmm
And just
yeah,
admitting that you're struggling with something, whatever it is, and then asking for help to somebody who either can help you with like practical tips, or even sometimes just listening is a good thing. Like, and if you don't have anybody willing to listen in your close surroundings, you maybe therapy is something that helped me
yeah,
when I was transitioning between doing the dog thing full time and then getting a job. There was a long process for me to like admit that I needed something different, that I needed a change. And that really helped me, having a space where I could only talk about myself for an hour
yeah,
because the
absolutely.
person has paid for that.
And like you say, everyone needs to figure out what works for them. You know, it could be a
Yeah.
coach, it could be a therapist, it could be, like you say, a really good friend, it could be whatever works for that person's own needs. So yeah, absolutely amazing. Leah, thank you so much for coming on and sharing your experiences, your thoughts, your I suppose vulnerability, and it's absolutely amazing. And I think we need more of this in our lovely little dog community, because you know, when we share these ideas with each other, it makes us all so much stronger, and it makes it that little bit
Yeah.
easier to collaborate and work together and do all of the good stuff and leave the other stuff at the door, you know,
Yeah.
the self-doubt and the rest of it. Yeah.
Yeah. And reaching out to people can be scary,
Yeah.
but it is worth it. And what's the worst that can happen? Let's say you message somebody to ask them a question. Worst thing that happens, they don't reply, or they tell you they can't help you. But after this gesture, you've tried. That
Yeah.
person isn't going to come knocking at your door being like, hey, can I help you? So
Exactly.
I think it is scary, but going past this and being able to say, hey, can you help me with this? And people actually usually will do it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And like you say, someone mightn't have time right now and might forget to answer or whatever. Don't take it badly. Move on to the next thing. Dust off and move on. It's
Yeah.
because often, you know, things just get lost in someone's busy inbox, or they're traveling for a conference, or they're doing something, and it's just gets lost. So
Yeah, definitely.
it's worth not getting too upset about it, and moving on and building up those relationships where you can. Thank you once again so much for coming on. It's been an absolute pleasure speaking with you as always, and I hope to speak with you very soon again.
You will for sure. That was brilliant. Thank you so much for having
Thank
me.
you. And once again, a huge thank you to Leah for coming on and speaking with us this week on the podcast and sharing such honest and open opinions and experiences. We appreciate it so much. If you would like to find out what Leah gets up to at Harmony for Paws, and what we get up to at Ruby Reese and at dognutrition.ie, you can find all of our websites, our social media handles, and all the rest of it down in our show notes. Please remember the ask that I had of you at the beginning of this podcast episode. Please find an episode, any episode at all, and share it with someone you think it will be of value to. We appreciate it so much. Have a brilliant week, and we look forward to bringing another podcast episode to you next Tuesday.